Joining us is John Bolton, American politician, diplomat, former U.S. National Security Advisor, and I should add, more recently, also an author. Despite the efforts of certain people, Mr. Bolton, I welcome you and thank you for joining our conversation.
I'm very glad to join you. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome, Mr. Bolton. We would, of course, like to hear your assessment of the American leadership's peace efforts to resolve the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. As your press writes, here we call it a war.
It seems to me that Donald Trump's motivation is mostly not about considerations of U.S. national security, NATO, or Ukraine. The main driving force here is the Nobel Prize, the Peace Prize. He worries less about the material terms of a future agreement, deal, or any conditions between Russia and Ukraine, and simply wants to pull off this deal. Sometimes he leans toward Ukraine, sometimes he doesn't. Then again, he's supportive. That's not the point. That's not how he sees it. That's not where the strength lies. The strength lies in whether he can secure some kind of agreement between Moscow and Kyiv to claim all the glory for himself. It's not just about that norm. It's not just about the terms of a potential agreement, but whether he can force, Ukraine and the Europeans with them to accept these conditions. This is the danger that has now arisen.
Tell me, please, the stumbling block of all peace negotiations. There remains a point called exchange of territories, although in reality it's about dividing Ukrainian lands. No one intends to exchange anything. Tell me, please, President Zelensky has said many times that this is unacceptable and impossible, even from the perspective of Ukrainian law. But in the White House, this idea just isn't being heard. How can it be conveyed? Why don't they want to hear it?
For Trump, land is just land. You know, he's a developer. One plot will go for this, another will go for that. Developers don't worry too much. This one's for an office, that one's for some other buildings, and that's how he looks at everything. And the whole Donbass, his good friend Vladimir Putin says he wants all the territories that, thank you. From Trump's point of view, let it be, let it go. That's why arguing about the Ukrainian constitution doesn't interest him. He's not interested. That's not what concerns him. I think President Zelensky has handled the proposals for possible compromises well. The suggestions, possible compromises, the Europeans are pressuring, explanations are being given. But this needs to be done very carefully. When and if a ceasefire agreement arises, whether it will or not, but in the event that such an agreement does come about, there will be a temporary border between Russia and Ukraine. This is a matter of security guarantees. And so far, Donald Trump is doing nothing about this.
Mr. Bolton, but do you agree that the choice facing the Ukrainian leadership right now is extremely difficult given the pressure from both American and European partners as well as from our enemy Russia? In your opinion, what course of action would be most effective for Ukraine to preserve its statehood?
It seems to me that you need to consider the possibility of maintaining a steady flow of intelligence from the United States. The Europeans simply cannot provide this, and it is necessary for the current Trump-era policy of selling weapons and all kinds of equipment to European NATO partners to continue so that this can then be transferred to Ukraine. If this continues, then I think it will be the best possible outcome of all this. I am very concerned about certain conditions that Ukraine might be forced to accept under pressure. This could then turn into fixed borders for a long time, and the Russians will be able to violate these borders whenever they please, whenever they feel ready. NATO membership for Ukraine is unacceptable. Yes, says Trump, so there is no other solution to this.
Mr. Bolton, you just said that, according to President Trump, Ukraine's membership in NATO is unacceptable. And how sincere was the Democratic administration regarding this point?
Well, they never truly spoke about it sincerely or openly, but they certainly didn't oppose it either. It has now been more than 3 long years, a significant period of time since that moment of war, but there is no NATO strategy to win this war, to achieve victory in the war. They say, we will be with you for as long as it takes, but Ukrainians respond, we don't need you to be with us for that long. We just need you to help us win. Well, Trump still has 3 years to present himself to serve as president, and Putin knows this. And he's playing on these strings, and very successfully. But now, it's simply impossible to truly take back what was freely offered.
You mentioned the relationship between Putin and Trump. I'll even remind you of a quote from you. Putin knows how to play Trump and thinks it's very dangerous. You are someone who knows Trump personally. You've worked with him. What do you think is the key that Putin found to reach Trump? After all, we see that neither Zelensky nor European partners are able to have such a long-lasting relationship and influence on Trump. No matter what arguments they present, time passes, call after call after call, and Trump changes his mind again. What is the secret that Putin has discovered? I
would like to answer this question properly and thoroughly, but whatever the reason for such admiration from such a major, powerful figure, whether it's Kim Jong-un, Iran, Putin, or someone else, Putin uses his KGB tricks against Trump. I don't think they have any compromise on Trump or anything like that. But a good KGB agent, a good operative, can exploit such weaknesses, can say certain things. And he managed to do this very well with Trump. Zelensky has made efforts to build a relationship with Trump. Trump does not see Zelensky as a strong leader of a powerful country. Trump views everything through the lens of his own personal relationships with world leaders. And he doesn't really understand what global security is. It's a matter of personal relationships.
Mr. Bolton, since the name of the president of Ukraine has already come up, it's worth discussing this point as well. The so-called peace agreements. I mean the elections, because President Trump said that elections are needed in Ukraine. President Zelensky responded that he is ready to hold elections. As someone who observes this pressure, do you have any idea what goal the White House is pursuing by pushing Ukraine toward elections? And who is President Trump's favorite?
I think that President Trump and Steve Witkoff are hearing from the Russians that Zelensky is unpopular among his own people, that there is corruption, that there are scandals. I think they believe that the elections will reveal some kind of division within Ukrainian society. 4 years of war, democracy is strong in some ways, but in the very ways it is strong, it can also be exploited with malicious intent. I think that during wartime, you can't have elections. Many territories are uncontrolled, have been taken, and we can't forget about those who were forced to leave these areas. I think this idea of elections and a referendum is misguided because it plays into their hands. It's a gift to the Russians, and it works against Ukraine.
You didn't answer about Trump's favorite? Well,
Trump, as he has shown in recent days, can explain himself who he voted for, because I don't know who his favorite is, or if it would even be wise for him to have one. He just doesn't talk about it. But I wouldn't be surprised if he makes such a statement. These are very unstable, uncertain times. If there isn't solid support from the Ukrainian people for someone, I think it only benefits Russia.
The American president has received yet another slap in the face from his Kremlin idol. While Donald Trump and his envoys, shouting over logic and common sense, keep yelling that Putin wants peace and that the war is happening only because of the stubborn Ukrainians, Putin himself and his propaganda have completely stopped hiding their bloodthirsty plans. In recent weeks, the information space has been flooded with a wave of candid confessions from these so-called peace-loving occupiers.
Well, apparently that's exactly what's happening, just mowing down everything on the left bank. Next, the surging crowd will inevitably sweep across the entire expanse of Ukraine, and it will then become much easier to effectively clear the vast territory of the remaining undesirable riffraff and any lingering elements there. Yeah, it's very cynical, but it's a pragmatic move. And why should we care about this population? Nothing terrible will happen if some girl named Galia dies in colicky. In Chernihiv,
While Trump, in between chatting with turkeys and napping during meetings, is pressuring Ukraine to force it to surrender, Putin is openly and with a smile threatening Europe with war and complete physical destruction.
But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The only question is, about what? If Europe suddenly starts a war with us, I think it will be over very quickly. This isn't Ukraine. With Ukraine, we're acting in a surgical manner there. If Europe suddenly wants to start a war with us and does so, then it's very possible a situation could very quickly arise where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
If you set aside the schizophrenic nonsense about surgical annihilation of entire cities and focus only on the essence, then Putin is promising to kill Europeans, and in an even more brutal way than Ukrainians. Peacefulness is just oozing from every pore. After this statement from the leader, Russian officials and propagandists felt they no longer needed to restrain themselves and broke loose. The world saw the true face of Russia and heard firsthand about its real plans, which include anything at all. Barbarity except for peace.
The EU as a structure is a criminal and terrorist organization. Therefore, we must expel anyone here who is connected to official EU structures, sever any existing relations, review any laws in place, and declare them a terrorist organization. Based on this, we will pursue them just as we pursue terrorists. That is, to declare Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas and others as terrorists. And if we find them in the restroom, we'll take them out. In other words, we are dealing with a Nazi terrorist entity.
Sounds very peaceful, doesn't it? The Americans urgently need to lift the sanctions. And Putin must definitely be invited to the White House for Christmas dinner, where they can discuss joint bombings of Europe with him. Because it's rather strange how America's statement that it no longer wants to protect its European allies coincided with this, and the sharply aggressive and threatening rhetoric from Moscow.
The war will not end until we defeat Europe morally and politically, until the deranged European elites do not stop their next mad dash toward a world war. I think that in any case, it will not be possible to achieve a final stable peace. Well, maybe the situation can be stabilized to some extent because Europe will fall apart and turn back into what it has always been.
Trump supporters on their information platforms are already openly calling for an alliance with Russia, just at the time when Putin is threatening to destroy NATO members.
Russia is a truly deeply religious Christian country that was our staunch and loyal ally in the great global World War II.
Oh, what an idiot.
Europe needs to wake up and seriously think about how it will live on, caught between a peacemaking America and a peace-loving Russia. Fortunately, Russian fascists, with their statements, are doing everything they can to wake Europe up. And not just Europe. It hasn't even been 2 weeks since the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, was kissing up to Moth and signing a strategic partnership when Russians started demanding the seizure of northern Kazakhstan. Why? Because it's originally Russian land.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly mirrored in Kazakhstan. There too, there are huge regions populated by Russian speakers.
There in Kazakhstan, some people believe that we, in the long run, want to, according to what they call the Ukrainian scenario, take away northern Kazakhstan from them. What do you think? Did we have such plans? Do we have any designs on this?
I believe that we have historical rights to this land. This is an industrial region. These are cities that our ancestors built. Why did we give them away?
Is there anyone who still believes that after the war with Ukraine ends, Russia will live peacefully? For them, finding a pretext to discover Nazi Banderites somewhere is as easy as pie. Maybe Putin is trying for his friend Trump so that he can stop 10, 15, or even 100 wars. And finally, get his Nobel Prize. However, as far as we know, the Nobel Prize isn't awarded for colluding with an aggressor.
I believe that the ugly offspring of the Belovesh Accords should be eliminated altogether. We don't need Ukraine in any form.
You know perfectly well.
As a state at all, we need it to be rich,
strong and good.
with dumplings, with wheat, with beautiful girls as part of Russia. Yeah, can you imagine how much she eats? Galicians return them, I emphasize, to the Poles.
Colleagues said that was simply a wonderful toast. They
have no brains.
The most cannibalistic confessions from Russians, of course, concern Ukraine. Even Goebbels and Chikatilo would be envious of their plan. Just take Putin's admission about how he held referendums in the occupied territories. The crazy old man, giving an interview to Indian media with a deranged grin, said that people had a choice. Either support Russia or abandon their homes and leave.
We gave people the opportunity to express themselves in an open referendum. Those who thought it made sense to be with Russia voted for it. Those who didn't could calmly leave for other parts. Of the Ukrainian state, please, we don't decide that.
No words.
It's impossible to even comment on this. It's just a straightforward confession of genocide. Everyone who is against the occupying army is being driven out of their own homes. Not a bad referendum.
I traveled to Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Luhansk again. Most people really do speak Russian. They speak Russian and they were very disappointed. What about in eastern Ukraine? Kiev banned this language. But they were also profoundly shocked, like, how could Vladimir Putin possibly do this to us? What exactly can you say to the many people in eastern Ukraine who have close families actually in Russia, who regularly and frequently move back and forth between Russia and Ukraine, their neighboring countries? What would you say to them?
I didn't understand the question. Shocked by what?
Yeah, you're an imbecile.
Putin doesn't understand why people were shocked by the bombing of their homes and the killing of their loved ones. The dictator's reaction completely reveals his psychological profile. He truly doesn't see anything wrong with waging an aggressive war. That's just how he is, comrade. Did Trump decide to make a deal and establish strategic cooperation?
Personally, I like the idea of reaching Transnistria. Why the hell would he need the sea? He doesn't need it. The damn sea.
Germany shouldn't exist. This needs to be understood. France shouldn't exist either.
Putin's closest advisor and the main person responsible for the ideology of Russian Nazism, Dugin, decided not to fall behind his boss and revealed the Kremlin's thermonuclear plans for Ukraine.
If we win, there will be no Ukraine. If the West wins, which is unlikely right now, Russia will use nuclear weapons to preserve our sovereignty, which means that in both cases, Ukraine will not exist.
So, in Russia's plans, there is simply no option for Ukraine to exist at all. And our American comrades are forcing us to sign some kind of truce with them, without any security guarantees.
Excellent plan, Walter. As reliable as a Swiss watch.
Trump also wants Ukraine to hand over part of Donbass to Russia without a fight. But it's not just empty land. Washington is proposing to hand over hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens to occupation. It wouldn't hurt our respected overseas partners to listen to what plans the Russian fascists have for Ukrainians.
Since 2014, everyone there, from kindergarten directors to members of the government, are all Nazis. In order to cleanse them, there needs to be a proper state program of denazification led by a Russian administration. Otherwise, you'll never cleanse them.
Well, what are we supposed to do with them? And
we'll just immediately start arresting and then subsequently deporting all of them without any further delay.
Why did they even let him out of the hospital?
It's being stated absolutely openly and calmly that Ukrainians under occupation will be second-class citizens. Subhuman even less. They face filtration and repression. The Ukrainian language and culture will be banned, schools destroyed, and books burned. And this is already happening in the occupied territories. Ukrainians are being thrown into basements just for speaking Ukrainian.
We stopped at a gas station before the city, before Berdyansk. "Good evening, please tap your card," she said. I said, "Why are you speaking to me in Ukrainian?" The girl just stood there. I said, "Why are you speaking to me in Ukrainian?" She stayed silent. I asked again, "Why are you speaking to me in Ukrainian?" She said, "Because I want to." Well, if you want to, fine, that's it. At the next checkpoint, we'll send you to Adamakarer, to the basement. To the basement, let's go.
To rest, here's John Silver.
Let's go rest in the basement.
And now Trump is offering to hand over Ukrainian citizens to these Nazis, so that later he can trade with them and play golf together. These Nazis, who openly admit to crimes against humanity, are the ones the American administration wants to keep. Not only without punishment, but actually to encourage them. This isn't even like the Munich Agreement of 1938. This is something more perverted, something beyond good. 9999. Russians no longer hide behind the fake fight against mythical fascists and the protection of Russian speakers. They openly say that they are waging a war of conquest in order to destroy an independent European state and commit genocide against an entire European people. Russians are no longer ashamed of being Nazis. What's the point if no one condemns them for it, but rather the opposite?
Well, to really solve this issue now that we've started, it can only be done by liquidating the Ukrainian state. There will be work to do with those people who want to live there. This work involves the security services as well as education, upbringing, integration, and so on. There are a lot of different scenarios that could be described here. That is, from a gradual approach, not like how we immediately handed out passports in Melitopol, checking and filtering these people.
If anyone in the West still hopes that they can buy off Moscow with some territories and that it will stop, let us quickly disappoint them. Russia plans to keep fighting and to fight for a long time. Now, their propaganda is already whining that there aren't enough soldiers and that people need to be forced into the army at gunpoint.
In a few weeks, the duration of this war will match that of the Great Patriotic War. When people ask, why haven't we achieved the same result? It's because not the whole country is at war. The leadership is at war. Our problem isn't at the front, our problem is in the rear. And something needs to be done about this. We need Smersh. It's not conscience we need to appeal to. There is truly nothing that convinces individuals quite as effectively as the uniquely distinctive and unmistakable auditory sensation of a precisely cocked bolt ready for action.
That doesn't really fit with Trump's statement that Russia is striving for peace, does it? You can negotiate with a maniac. He can only be neutralized by force. The sooner the Western world comes to this simple solution, the sooner peace will come to Earth.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.